If you're struggling with erectile dysfunction and you've already tried things like no-fap, changing your diet, and tried supplements and things like that, and you haven't got the results you're looking for, this is going to be a great video for you. Today I'm going to talk about some of the ways you can deal with psychological erectile dysfunction with whether or not you have other types of things going on. You're definitely experiencing this. So if you're experiencing anxiety while you're having sex, this video is for you. And if you get something out of it, please do hit the like button down there. It does help with the YouTube algorithm. And if you're looking for a little bit more help with something like that, there's a link down below on how to get a hold of me. I do help men with this one-on-one. All right, stick around. I'm Cam Joyner, and today I'm going to be talking about how your erectile dysfunction doesn't exist as an island. And so what I mean by that is when men are approaching this problem, they tend to think, okay, well, I have a sexual problem going on and I have to look at it from a perspective of sex, which is reasonable. That's the way most of us have been taught to think. But I want to change the way that you look at this problem quite a bit because this is really important in dealing with it. If you go strictly from the perspective of how do I look at this problem around sex, you're never going to solve it because this problem is bigger than sex. It's a problem that actually relates deeply to what's happening in your life and what's happening inside of you. So it's a problem that exists within your thoughts and your feelings and how you view yourself and how you view relationships. And when we start to look at it from that perspective, it starts to make a little bit more sense. So it not only is this problem something that's happening to you, but it also does affect other people. And this is really important to look at as well. So let's look at how it's impacted you first. So most guys who are dealing with ED, especially ones that have been dealing with it for a long period of time, they're really feeling a lot of different things. One of them, really common things, are like depression, isolation. They feel a lot of loneliness. And then a really common phrase that I hear is, I feel broken. That's probably the most common thing that I hear guys say is they feel like it's broken and they feel like ED is like stealing part of their lives. And so if you think about how deeply those things impact you, it's also easy to take a next step and say, okay, well, those things are probably affecting people in your life as well. So I know for myself, I was living when I was going through like the deepest, darkest parts of my battle with erectile dysfunction, I was living with my sister and her boyfriend. And I completely isolated myself. I spent a lot of time alone. I spent a lot of time not doing little things that I should have done, like taking care of my dishes and taking care of my hygiene well. And just it impacted the way I showed up to everyone in my life. I spent less time with my family. I was less present with them when I actually was with them. I spent less time, taking care of them and like listening to what was going on in their lives because I was so obsessed with what was happening to me. And so starting to notice that this problem is big. It is bigger than sex, whether you want it to be or not. So outside of the bedroom, you feel all these feelings. You're not feeling depressed while you're having sex with someone. Maybe you are, but you're also feeling it when you're not having sex with someone. So it's obviously not just a sexual issue. And then if we take that further, it affects your relationships that are non-sexual. So it affects relationships with family and friends. It affects relationships with people at work because, if you're feeling depressed, there's no way that doesn't show up in your job. Even if you love your job and you show up every day and you're excited to be there, that depression still gets dragged with you. Decisions you make with how you interact with people at your job are also typically going to be reflective of what's going on. Most guys, when they're dealing with erectile dysfunction, they're dealing with a deep level of fear and a deep level of insecurity. And those things definitely show up in your workplace. It was really hard for me to see this until after I had actually already overcome it. It was based on the fear that I was going through and that I didn't think that I could go after the types of things that I wanted. I'd always been entrepreneurial minded, but I took a cushy, stable job in the IT world because I knew I would make good money there and I would always be safe. So these types of things, they do bleed into the rest of our life. Starting to look at this, the reason that this is important to look at is because if you're trying to solve this problem alone, you're missing the point. This problem is not an isolated problem. It's not your problem that has to be solved by you, and then you can start to engage in relationships with other people. This issue can only be solved in relationships. So the types of relationships, there's a lot of different types that can help you with stuff like this. But let's start with the relationship to your thoughts and your feelings, because this is a really important part of what's going on. Your thoughts and feelings are both a good place to look when you want to start understanding what's happening for you inside. And your thoughts, the first place to look is just thought loops. So the most obvious thought loop that guys get stuck in when they have ED is, oh no, am I going to lose my erection or something like that while they're having sex or while they're with somebody, or even before they get to the point of having sex, is like, am I going to be able to get it up? So there's loops of things that just happen over and over and over again. That's a really common one. So when you start to see stuff like that, you should start examining what's happening behind it. If you're looking at a thought loop, what's the emotion that's related to that? In the case of, am I going to lose my erection? The thoughts themselves aren't as important. The important thing is, why are those thoughts happening? What is the emotion that's related to those thoughts? And if we start examining this, the really obvious one that comes up is fear. So the issue isn't that you need to think about losing your erection. The issue is that you're experiencing a fear that needs to be examined. You are afraid of losing your erection. And if we look at that, it's a pretty commonly universal experience for men who are having that thought loop that they are experiencing fear. But the thing that becomes a little bit trickier is that what you're afraid of in this case is not actually losing your erection. And as weird as that sounds, of course you don't want to. There will be an embarrassing experience there if you lose your erection. But if you start to look deeper at what's going on, there's something behind that fear. There's another layer down. And usually that fear, usually the layer that's down is also fear, but it usually has to do something like, if I lose my erection, she's going to leave me. Or if I lose my erection, she's going to tell her friends that I'm not good in bed. Or if I lose my erection, I'm never going to be able to please her, or something related to that. And there's usually that fear, that second layer fear, the not obvious one of I'm just going to lose my erection. That's where we start to get into the really juicy stuff about what's happening. And so that second layer of fear is usually the one where dealing with it starts to resolve the ED. And this is really important to look at because a lot of guys, when they're trying to solve their ED, they look at physical causes. They go into like supplements and what's my testosterone level and do I have a venous leak and all these different things. And if you're looking at venous leak, I have a video, I'm going to link it right here, that goes into a lot of reasons why most men who think they have a venous leak or even have been diagnosed are really dealing with something else. But it's important to look at this because it doesn't matter what the other things that you're thinking of are. If you give me a guy who has a venous leak and a diagnosed venous leak, and you ask him if he's experiencing these things, almost certainly he is. And if you deal with these other level problems, even if you have venous leak, you're going to see a vast improvement in your quality of erection. And for most guys who have a venous leak, they are going to see full erections return. And that's why it's so important to look at this. But you can't look at this problem on your own. So examining these things is very helpful. But even once you start to understand what that fear is, you have to do something about it. And so this is something that I tell my clients a lot. They've all heard me say this over and over and over and over again. But erectile dysfunction is a relational problem. And what that means is it is a problem that cannot be solved in isolation. It relates to relationships. It is involved with relationships. It's about how you see them. It's about how you experience them. It's about how you think about them. It's about the emotions that you have related to them. And so the place that you have to deal with something like this is in relationship with other people. So who do you deal with these problems with? The first place would be me. I help men work with this problem all the time. With someone like me, you can open up and talk about these issues, and I can guide you through them and help you move past them. I'm obviously not the only resource out there, so let me give you some other ones as well. A great place to go for help is a therapist. Therapists are trained in how to deal with painful issues and how to start getting you to deal with some of that underlying emotional stuff. When you start dealing with the emotional stuff, everything starts moving better. So just being able to talk about how painful this problem is tends to start letting the problem ease up some. The problem when you're holding it all in is that it starts to fester. And this problem has to be let out. It has to be looked at and examined and felt. So beyond therapists, there's other places that I would recommend too. And one of them is meditation. So meditation is a practice that's been used for thousands of years. and it's designed to help you deal with things like this. I can tell you that I don't think you're going to be able to meditate this problem away. I can tell you I gave that a real effort. I put a lot of time and effort into trying to meditate this problem away. It doesn't work. You're welcome to try if you want, but what it does do is it helps you become a lot more stable and comfortable with challenging experiences. And one of the reasons that it's really hard to deal with this problem is because the requirement to overcome it is dealing with a challenging emotional experience. My clients don't like to hear this, but I always tell them that there is no way where you will overcome this problem without first facing an experience where you lose your erection with someone. And even if you've already done it in the past, if you work with me, I will make you do that because it's what is required to resolve the problem. And meditation, the way that it's really helpful is just that it helps you relax and it helps you be okay and stable when you're in an emotionally challenging experience. And then when you're emotionally stable, even though an experience is emotionally challenging, you realize that it's not that big of a deal. The problem with like grief and pain and fear and things like that is that they take control of our mind. They take our attention. If this is my hand is our attention, fear and whatever the emotion is, they take control of our emotion and it just follows our mind. It gets lost there. But if you can control your focus, then the emotion will just come in and it'll pass through and it'll leave. And it doesn't mean that you won't feel any fear or you're going to feel it at a deeper level than you're used to feeling. Because when your mind when your mind blows your attention all over the place, you never actually get to experience the emotion. It just sort of takes over. And so if you can relax and let yourself feel the emotion, it'll just pass through and it'll go away. It'll stop bothering you. The last thing is called circling. And circling is an interpersonal form of meditation. So it happens with 2 or more people. Sometimes it can be large groups. I've circled with a circle of 30 or 40 people. I've circled with just one other person. It just depends on the makeup of it. There's a group called Circling Europe. You can check them out. They do a lot of really good practices, and you can do some of it online since we are all in the middle of COVID. But basically what happens in circling is that you learn how to be okay with whatever experience you're having. We have a lot of patterns that are built into our minds about what we should and shouldn't do in relation with other people. And in circling, what they really focus on is whatever experiencing you're having is okay. If you're with someone and you feel uncomfortable, but you don't really have a good reason why, you learn how to just be okay and say, okay, I'm feeling uncomfortable right now. And then maybe you're attracted to them. You learn how to be okay with the fact that you're attracted to them and be okay telling them, and then they respond. Or whatever the feeling is, fear, anxiety, excitement, goofiness, playfulness, whatever. But it takes away all the social structures that are sort of built into how you would deal with somebody who's your cashier, or how you would deal with somebody on the subway, or how you deal with your boss. And it just removes all of those structures, and it creates a structure that's safe to be with whatever you're experiencing. And this is really helpful because it just allows you to allows whatever's happening to actually be okay. And a lot of times what happens, like during sex, when you're starting to feel that fear, instead of really experiencing the fear and just being okay with the fact that you feel afraid about messing things up with this person or, losing your erection, what you try to do is you try to power through it, and because you don't want to feel that. And so you think that I should be able to hold an erection even if I'm afraid, and I shouldn't be afraid. So I'm going to really focus and grit. And what happens is that you're rejecting your own experience. So literally the only thing that's happening in any given moment is the experience that's happening to you. And when you reject that experience, nothing good will ever come of that. It doesn't matter if you're in excruciating pain or excruciating joy. If you reject the experience that's happening to you in any moment, it is significantly worse for you than if you experience it. You can have a more pleasant experience feeling physical pain than you can by having all the pleasure in the world but not being able to really experience it. And it's a weird thing to say, but that's what happens when you start really paying attention. This is what one of the things meditation shines at, is really getting you into that, being able to experience whatever's happening. It doesn't mean that you want to go out and experience pain. It doesn't mean that you want to avoid pleasant experiences. That's definitely not the case. It's just that, can you stay with this and actually experience the painful things with the pleasurable things. And the more that you're able to stay with and experience the painful parts of life, the more you will be able to enjoy the pleasant parts as well. If you got something out of today's experience, please hit that like button down there in the corner. It makes a really big difference with the YouTube algorithm. And also subscribe so that you can get updates weekly. Dealing with ED is not a problem that one video is going to solve. It's something that you're going to have to put consistent effort into. And so it's helpful to get more and more information and more ways to deal with this, which will allow you over time to start resolving the issues that are causing it. And if you would like a little bit more help than that, I work with men one-on-one. I teach them all the things that I'm teaching in here. I teach them on a much more deep level because I have you one-on-one and I have things specific to your situation, so I can actually look at the patterns that you're dealing with and kind of come up with a custom way to deal with you directly instead of having to give a lot of different information about what could be relevant to anyone. So if that's interesting to you, you can find the link down below on how to get a hold of me. And if you just have a quick question, something you're struggling with, you can go to my subreddit that I've started. I've got a link down below for that as well. And other than that, I'll see you again next week. Thanks.